So, folks, this is the story of the Hungarians in the last round of the Northern League, and this wasn't the venue. This was the Saturday before the competition was on a Sunday. But the reason for driving up to Manchester to play in a one-day competition was that Fulham were playing Man City on the Saturday, so it seemed a very good way to conjure up a good weekend of football and wargaming. So this was going into the ground. Myself and Dave went up on Saturday morning. Managed to park up, get into the town, cram onto a tram, survive the inevitable, inexorable, relentless Manchester drizzle as well, and head to the Emirates Stadium. And it's a cracking stadium, obviously brand new, really good views from around the pitch. Obviously, as you can see, it's half full of City fans. It didn't really get much noisier when it did fill up, though. But we all had a good time in the away end, and we also, of course, managed to fit in a couple of pints at half time and possibly even one beforehand. One beforehand as well. So we were well set by midway through the game. It was a good game. Fulham were drawing 1-1. Man City got a player sent off, which sort of leveled things up a bit, right until about the last 5 minutes when City brought on their kind of cheating magic robot, huge monster boy, who put the ball in the net almost immediately, but it was disallowed for offside, and then Kevin De Bruyne, who I think is out of the World Cup by the time I'm recording this already, fell over for a very, very, very soft touch, and Robot Boy stepped up, and the inevitable happened in the 94th minute of extra time for Fulham to go down 2-1. But a very good game nonetheless. And going forwards, we headed back into town. Bizarrely, the rain had stopped. I didn't even know it was possible, but it must have been a brief break in the rain to head back into town, into this sort of cyberpunk landscape where we managed to stop at a microbrewery on the way, and had a number of beers there as well, before heading into town for the important part of the evening, choosing a pie and two sides for £11.50. That's about half the price that they now are around the Fulham's home ground. So that was a very good result as well. Couple more beers, and then back to the Premier Inn. You'll all recognise a Premier Inn breakfast. All the classic ingredients are there. Very well set up for a day's wargaming. You can't really get a better setup than that. And I'm sure this is the kind of meal that the Imperial Hungarian forces of I think Janos Hyundai and the Black Army would no doubt, they would have approved of the black pudding. So that ties us very neatly into the army that I was taking as well to the competition. So this was it. It was medieval Hungarian, post 1442 Black Army, which gives you some decent command and control. What this really is two big meat grinder commands, both of which have got an ability to protect their flanks but aren't that wide, and then a teeny tiny third command that is an irritating, but you can't ignore it, space filler. That can either occupy part of the table and retreat. It's small enough, 26 points out of 200, that even if you send it off table on a flank march, you're not missing too much. And if you look at the other two commands, they've both got that core of 4 knights, a spearman and a polearm support, spearman with Pavis, bit of shooting, crossbowman, bowman in there, light infantry firearm, of course. The first commander's got a tiny flanking cavalry force of 1 cavalryman and 2 light horse. The other one, it defends its flanks with the war wagon crossbow, which are not quite as much fun as war wagon artillery, but a bit cheaper, and the rest of the army is quite pricey. And then that third command, with almost no command and control, doesn't need it. It's only got 4 elements in it that can buzz around and do something irritating. So that was sort of the plan: force people to take the meat grinder. And really the rationale for taking the army wasn't so much tactics. It was actually, this was a lockdown painting army. I think it was my first lockdown painting army. Painted up mostly all of an Essex ready-made army and a load more stuff. Squeezed in a few. I think the blue guy on the left-hand side might be a Khorasan or an outpost, possibly. Cavalrymen. I had a few East European cavalrymen, but really I did most of them all up. Here are the light horse with Lance, the impact light horse, the Serbian hussars. Here you can see sort of the colour palette of mostly sort of greens and reds to give them a Hungarian vibe, although some of their shields and some of their flags depart from that a little. You see them a bit more closer up. All the horses are done pretty simply with, I think it's white undercoat, then painted in slightly thinned down colours, and then given washes of army coat, army painter as well. I gave them quite a few blazes and socks as well to brighten them up, and yeah, a few more of the well, actually no, these are slightly heavier cavalry. There were spare sort of knight type figures that I had left over, so I mixed some of them onto the bases for where there were heavy cavalry. None in this particular list. Obviously the war wagon too. You'll see Peter Pig's man being rude, giving you the finger there, and that was ready to chunk up and down the side of the table and do its stuff. I used these guys for the Clippy Arty. It's a random selection of, I think, Hussite flailmen, dismounted knights, guys with swords, and of course another Peter Pig, man being rude on the left, bearing his buttocks at the enemy in disdain. But you know, if you're supported armoured polearm guys, that's the kind of thing you can do. And here come the knights, heavy knights, sort of late knights in full plate armour, but with those distinctive, unusual shaped Hungarian shields, where in fact distinctive the fact the shields exist at all on some knights, I guess, and plenty of banners. I wanted just to make this a banner-tastic army. The spearmen with pavises, because they are carrying very big shields. These are printed. I just print them out on a normal printer, cut them to size, glue them on, give them a couple of coats of varnish, obviously paint around the edges as well to kind of blend them in. Looking a bit close up, you can see where that they've been stuck on, maybe on this third one from the left, and possibly that one, second one from the right as well. But at tabletop distances, they look much better than I could ever hope to paint anything. Here are the bowmen, unusual Hungarian distinctive bowmen. I can't just use generic medieval guys. It was a bit of a shame, and I did some sort of two-tone painting to give an effect of leather-esque type armour on it. And that really takes us very neatly onto the first game.
This means war. This means war.
So here we are on the first game, and as you can see, there's a Tuareg army deployed against me, against the Hungarians. Waterway on the right hand side, which I've got to narrow the table. This whole force them into the meat grinder strategy really is helped by a waterway. I managed to get down a plantation on the right and a field fairly centrally. Not a particularly big deal for the Tuaregs, I guess, but it sort of pushes the camels, or it gives a magnet for their medium foot swordsmen. Now the Tuaregs are a challenging army, mainly because it's got a lot of impetuous troops, but it doesn't have enough command and control to really use them or control them properly. So what you're always doing against a Tuareg army is trying to sort of trigger them to charge and to give them difficult manoeuvring challenges in order to get into combat. So again, if you look at my setup with the war wagon on the left here and a fairly narrow frontage, what I'm hoping to do is kind of take that group of camels on the left-hand end of their line out of the game and defeat the rest of the army piecemeal before they can really get into anything. What I've also done that you can't quite see yet is that I've put a flank march on that's coming over here with the tiny micro command. Ideally that comes on when these camels are already way down here, then it can rush across, maybe threaten the baggage, maybe threaten in the middle, draw some of the camels back. It's just a distraction piece really, but it could cause problems to an army that struggles for command and control. Well, really I'm just trying to beat sort of this half of it and draw them into this centerpiece here. So let's see how that starts off going. So the my army's solid. It's all very mixed up. It's that very confusing mix of stuff that in some ways creates enough vulnerability to make it feel worthwhile attacking. If this was a solid line of spears and knights, you're just not going to come near it. But sticking the bowmen in gives me some reach to push off light troops, but also makes it vulnerable enough to maybe be worth having a punt at. I sort of run out of troops here. I've just got light horse, I've got an ambush marker. I'm trying to delay these impetuous foot and hoping to draw these camels into a battle in the centre here. Over on the other side, you can see the impetuous foot have of course made a run for the field, the rough terrain. These knights will stop them coming out of it. Really here I've got two knights they can't take on and a war wagon that is there to delay them. The camels are starting to rush forward, but Unfortunately, bizarrely enough, this is a 6. These are Hungarian Flames of War dice. My flank march has arrived immediately before this big long line of impetuous camels has had time to rush up the table. So some of them are going to turn around and try and deal with whatever I'm bringing on here. Here in the middle, there's a bit of a gap developing as the Tuareg army spreads out wide and left, right and left. So these two groups will probably have to split. There's just some harassing light camels here trying to ping and shoot at me. And again, very little on this flank to deal with. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it's 6 or 7 camels here. This is just to delay them, hold them back there, maybe allow the flank march to cause trouble. If they stay there and kill 1 or 2 of my units, I'm happy as Larry on this one. And the war wagon is just drawing further to that side as well to try and pull some of this very mixed bunch of foot out away from the centre of the table. So here in the middle, even with the Vise, the camel bowmen of course get a lucky shot and do a bit of damage, but I'm not sure that's going to particularly change the game. Over on the other side, the impetuous foot have rushed into the plantation. I've fallen back out of it, and really I've not got too much there. It's just, but these are swordsmen with support. That's not too bad. And it's going to be very difficult for these guys to maneuver over and start to impact this part of the game. There's not command and control. The generals over here with camels, if they can sort of stay there and these guys can run away, that's not too bad. I'm kind of keeping them out of the game. Here, the camels have decided to come forwards anyway and just leave 1 to deal with the flank march. They can probably see there's a lot of points left on table in my army, so my flank march can't be too much. And the infantry are kind of coming forwards, but quite what they're going to do here against this thing, not sure. And the war wagon is just sitting there as an obstacle that, but by the time it potentially gets overwhelmed and beaten, it will still be a long way away from anything else. It's still a long way away from combat, so it's not bad as a blocker and a tempter. Here comes my half-hearted flank march. The medium cavalry general in the middle, a couple of cavalry light horse outriding. This guy is obviously making a very, very, very long run for the baggage, which is right on the other side. 1 camel has fled away from the edge of the table, but will now come back, and they've rolled a 1, so their command and control is really starting to hurt them now. Their ability to come back and do anything clever is kind of limited. Over here, with the light horse, light cavalry in the middle driven off, and these infantry sort of committed, this gap is ripe for exploiting. So what I'm trying to do is wheel forward my tough troops, spearmen, 2 knights. That's good to deal with camels, and leave the bowmen a little bit behind, and then start to form a sort of half-hearted defensive line here to stop these guys getting too involved in it. If I push this forward, they've kind of got to deal with it. So I'm trying to take those on, maybe get a couple of shots to damage them, and win in a meat grinder. Whilst this gets ready to see if these guys jump out and try and do something bold. They've not done that yet. This is just a different view to show that they're still there. I think there's either a javelinman or a drilled, non-impetuous swordsman in here. This slightly different colour one gives them a bit of flexibility, but this isn't a formation that swordsmen want to be taking on impetuous swordsmen at all. And the war wagon is still sat there lurking and moving about a little bit. So they have given it a go. They've done the classic charge out, look at the factors, plan for an overlap, come rushing out and take it on the front end. Unfortunately, the rules for war wagons mean that you can't have overlaps against them. So this guy has just discovered that he's kind of not contributing at all to the combat, and there's just sort of a one-on-one fight here. Unfortunately, it is before I managed to get my war wagon deployed to give it a bit more defensive oomph. So that's a bit of a downer. And the camels have kind of some of them have driven forwards, some of them have driven forwards a bit, and 1 guy is now engaged at the back into my light horse. That's not a good matchup for my light horse, but I can probably mob him later on. So far so good. Yeah, there is a slightly clearer shot of them doing that. So in some ways, so far so good. It's kind of working. The main win at the moment is that the enemy is broken up and isn't running a simple coherent attack. They're having to wheel, they're having to split their groups up. They've got threats from all sides. At some point, that command and control weakness is going to count, and they're going to lose control of people. Sorry, jump forwards a bit there. So because a couple of them have gone over to attack the wagon, there's just a rather hapless couple here as well, staring down the knights. My knights can't do too much about it, but I'm happy there. This takes time. The win is trying to be happening over here, and at some point they might lose patience and think about having a go. So Over on the other side, I've snuck forward far enough that some of these guys have decided to jump out. The others didn't quite have range, so that's a very tricky attacking swordsman with rear support with two overlaps. That's not particularly going to end well. And here the camels have decided to go in as well. They camels are impetuous. They just have to charge people. They don't really even have the option, particularly against a mixed formation like this, of ignoring steady close formation foot that other types of other cavalry charging troops do have. So what's going on over here? The wagon's doing pretty well actually. It's doing some damage to the swordsman. This guy's still useless. There's some action going on here. I think it looks like I'm starting to surround them. We'll probably see that later. The standoff is still going on there, and these guys are going to struggle to really do much, particularly if those haven't blown away the wagon at first contact. If they're starting to be injured, there's suddenly a lot of troops. Sorry, going back to it, a lot of troops there who are struggling to get into the game. Sorry, there we go. And here, this matchup looks like the camels have taken some damage against the spears. Unfortunately, one of my knights has taken damage, but in subsequent turns, my armor, my better status, usually allows knights to grind down camels, even if one hit on the first round. And I've got opportunity to bring up supports. They are going to struggle to do so a bit more. There's clearly some hits going on this guy who's charged into a desperate situation. Here, that camel has gone through my light horse, but this will now be my turn to swarm it. A blur of action, but yeah, there you can see it's swarmed it in the background. And over here, this is still going on. This face-off is still going on. This guy's kind of going to struggle now, isn't he? Completely surrounded, even being a camel. My delaying force that started off up here has now fallen all the way back to the edge of the table. It's super safe now. It's not going to get caught by the camels. They've really got to do a long run round here, which is probably more turns than the game will last before they can even get close to anything they want to be fighting, because they don't want to be fighting the wagon. That would be a bad outcome for them. Over here, my knights are not doing as well as they should do, really. The camels have burst through. They're starting to do some damage on the spearmen, but starting to run out of points as well. I've not managed to move these reserves up, and this guy's sort of threatening as well to join in. So this is not great, but it looks like some of these swordsmen have been tempted to rush out of the terrain as well and try and get engaged in a fight. I'll have to deal with them quickly, otherwise this guy could become a bit of a massive problem as he breaks through the centre slightly against the odds. The battle against the wagon is still chugging along. The knights are still doing a bit of a face-off against this guy, even though he's been tempted to charge there, or I've forced him to charge there. The spare one has actually found a target in one of my lurking crossbow guys, but again, it's all splitting everybody up. I'm taking a few hits, possibly against the odds here, but the more I split the enemy up, the harder it's going to be for them to capitalise on anything that they do luckily get to win. And there you go. That camel over there has been killed. I'm now back on the run to the baggage, and a couple of camels are no longer coming down this way. They've decided they've got to turn around, which is soaking up command and control from this block of camels down here. That general's now got a lot to do. He's got to manage them to deal with this threat, and he's got to push them forwards, which is just going to be too much, almost certainly. So here we go with the infantry now being split into 4 blocks. That suddenly created opportunities for the knights to start doing some stuff. They've come in and are chewing up the flank of this infantryman before he's run over the bowman. This battle is still going on. The camels are going on a long march, and fighting is almost happening here. It's almost worth doing, and I've managed to get overlaps up to try and shore up this one as well. Over on this side, this is still happening. There's somebody blocking that camel from doing anything too clever now. I've brought the bowman up anyway to try and force a win here on both of these ones. If I can win here or win here, the camel will get into a bowman, but then I've got spares and extra people floating around. I'm starting to get potentially 1, 2, 3, 4 if there's a win here and a win here. Big gap with only this guy in the middle. These guys have come out to give support, but here my cavalry can either stand or they can run away. They're not going to kill anybody else. They're not really doing anything particularly decisive, is the plan. And here, next thing, this guy's now gone. This guy's now gone, almost as if I predicted. There's now a big swathe of my own troops here that are free to do clever stuff And actually potentially there's even these guys being forced to pull themselves sideways and conform into my swordsman, which would not be a bad outcome either. So what's going on here? Finally, the wagon is gone. The camels are still doing the long march. Crossbows have lost, but these guys have suffered some damage here. And when this knight wins, this guy's suddenly a very vulnerable target as well. The camels might become a vulnerable target as well. I've expended 2 units here to break this whole lot up and neutralize a lot of the enemy fighting power. 4 of their infantry and 6 or 7 of their pokey camels as well. Over on this side, that floating camel has committed and gone straight through my bowman, but these guys have decided to go into cavalry. That's not worked out well there, but I've got a lot of free troops here as the camels are forced to pursue, and I'm still winning. There's some more hit markers on this camel here. Here, this guy's now been neutralized by sticking a spearman in his face that he has to deal with, and it's starting to be, again, a lot of spare troops to do clever stuff against this more disorganized and broken apart enemy. And here that is just starting to happen. The bowmen turn into the flank, the spearmen turn into flank, these guys turn into flank. Disaster time for them. These guys, those are forced to fight a spearman with an overlap, with a spare knight here. So you can look at that and go, they're in trouble. They might go this turn, they might go this turn. They've already got multiple hits. That will go into their flank and kill them off. There's a real set of skittles happening here with this broken apart Tuareg army that's going to put them in a lot of problems with the Hungarians having weighted or tempted them into a bit more of a piecemeal charge and then somehow created an advantage of numbers despite having a pretty small army to start with. And then over on the other flank, these guys are still hanging on against the knights, but these guys have finally won and killed them off. So there's a lot of casualties starting to stack up here on what's still not a great, massively sized Tuareg army, with the elite camels being pretty expensive. So, and there's not really that many Hungarian actual losses. There's the wagon, there's the crossbow, but the infantry and the rest of it's. So here we go, getting to the end game here. The Tuareg cavalry in their multicoloured hats, by the look of it, they've raced all the way across the field from their starting position here. They had a little bit of a fumble when the flank march came on. They just carried on. They've gone past the ex-war wagon that used to sit in this back. They've sort of swung round. They must be zeroing in the baggage by now, but actually they and these cavalry here have both really played very little part in the game. The cavalry, the Hungarian cavalry who did the flank march, have just come up here to kind of be safe and keep themselves out of trouble. But the game is really kind of cracking on and is looking to happen or come to a close now, as a lot of the Tuareg infantry and some of their central cavalry have been whittled away in the meat grinder. And this is it. This is kind of the closing position. It does look pretty kind of fragile, but I think the secret, this is the baggage. The camels are here. They've come round, and then this sort of defensive arc with a lot of gaps in it here with the Hungarians. But I think the thing to remember though is the Hungarian army is actually still pretty small. So there's not too many losses here. You've got spearmen in place. You've got the mixed formation of swordsmen, You've got crossbows there. There's a bow unit missing. There's a bow unit lost there. The knights are still in play. Only one knight there. 2 knights both still in play there. Cavalry holding off the Tuaregs here. But all that big lump of Tuareg infantry, that's gone. There's only 1 camel left in the middle. There's only 1, I think 2 maybe infantrymen left here, and this one is falling apart as well. So for what's they look like they're big gaps, nearly all of the Hungarian army is still in place, and it has chewed up in the Hungarian meat grinder slightly more aggressively than maybe it should have done. But it's gone forward. It's tempted the Tuaregs to attack piecemeal. It's kept a lot of their potent troops out of the game, and that's how it ends up as a win for Hungary.